Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. I think my new favorite author is Amor Towles, and he just written wrote Cloud Cuckooland and All the Light We Cannot See, which may be my favorite book ever. But he's just finished writing a book of short stories called Table for Two, and he's just a wonderful writer. And the introduction to one of his short stories tells of people I know nothing about, the rich wasps of New York City. And I thought I would read this to you both to give you a look at that kind of group of people, which you may not know, as well as this wonderful writing style. This part of it is called Lunch at La Maison. It's about 3 minutes, I'm guessing. The only advantage to growing old is that one loses one's appetites. After the age of 65, one wishes to travel less, to eat less, own less, and at that point, there is no better way to end one's day than with a few sips of an old scotch, a few pages of an old novel, and a king-size bed without distractions. Certainly some of this decline stems from the inevitable degeneration of the physical form. As we age, our senses grow less acute. And since it is through the senses that we satisfy our appetites, it is only natural that when our eyes, ears, and fingers falter, that we should begin to desire with a diminished intensity. Then there is the matter of seasoned familiarity. By the time our hair goes gray, not only have we sampled most of life's pleasures, we've sampled them in different locations at different times of day. But in the final accounting, I suspect the cessation of appetites is mostly a matter of maturity. Traipsing after a beautiful young thing late into the night, going from one trendy spot to the next, and trying rather desperately to think of something witty to say while pouring a well-aged Bordeaux at our own expense. Really, at this stage, who can be bothered? But if a decline in the appetites brings some sense of relief to most who age, it is particularly welcome to those in their 60s who can no longer afford the lifestyle of their 40s. On the Isle of Manhattan, this population is more sizable than you might expect. Well-meaning husbands who have put off their financial planning for 1 decade too many routinely strand their widows with insufficient funds. Others who proved capable in commerce as younger men become careless or even foolish in retirement, wasting badly needed resources on real estate speculations, mistresses, and charity. Then there are those sensible fellows, like me, who, having carefully calculated the necessary capital to support their retirement and prudently set aside savings from year to year, turned a blind eye to the frothiness of a bull market and smugly quit their job only to be brought up 6 months short by the ensuing collapse. Whatever the excuses, many who reach their golden years on the Upper East Side of Manhattan find themselves suddenly forced to live below their prior means. So it's just as well they no longer want what they can't afford. Are you finished, Mr. Skinner? Yes, thank you, Louise. Will there be anything else? Just the check. Clearing what's left of my salad niçoise, Louise winds her way to the La Maison kitchen through a maze of mostly empty tables. There was a time when you could track the evolution of power in Manhattan by dining at La Maison, located at 63rd and Madison, offering a serviceable execution of continental cuisine. The restaurant welcomed real estate developers, advertising executives, financiers, and the ladies who lunched. Over the years, the decor grew a little tired, the food a little outmoded, and those in the know moved on to brighter venues serving brighter fare. But if La Maison was no longer the most sought-after table in town, it was not entirely déclassé. There were still a few veterans of commerce and society who, out of habit or lack of imagination, returned for the prefix lunch. There in the corner, for example, is Lawrence Lightman, a stately 6'2". Lawrence hadn't led a publishing house in over a decade, but continues to wear a coat and tie, and he apparently made enough of a name for himself that aspirants in the field still make the occasional pilgrimage to his table. Closer to the bar is Bobby Daniels, a former partner at Morgan Stanley. Bobby was once considered a prodigy in the field of acquisitions and divestments. In fact, this skill came so naturally to him he acquired and divested 4 different wives. He now has an office at some mahogany panel trust company where his primary responsibility is the hanging of his hat in sight of the clients. And over there at the table by the door sits Madeline Davis. 70 if a day, Madeline has been a widow for at least 4 presidential elections, and it shows. The dress she's wearing has gone in and out of style twice since she bought it in 1962, and she applies her makeup with all the misplaced generosity of a roquette. She also happens to be a particularly divine example of the Park Avenue pauper. Though she hasn't given a dime to charity, purchased a work of art, or read a book in over 20 years, when her husband was still alive, and the Davis name was indelibly etched onto the mailing list of the city's museums, galleries, and publishers. This proved fortuitous, since, as her income shrank, Madeline could dine at least twice a week on cold canapes and warm white wine at the latest opening or reception. In fact, at some point in the late 1990s, as these quasi-affairs were getting most extravagant, she began carrying Ziploc bags in her purse, so that when no one was looking, she could pilfer enough food from the buffet to last her the week. This delightful practice went on for some time. Then, one night at the Museum of Natural History, at a benefit for something or other, she came face to face with a pyramid of Swedish meatballs. The dish must have been her weak spot, for bypassing the crudités and cheese platters, Madeline opted to fill all 3 of her baggies with the delectable little spheres, spooning in some extra gravy for good measure. At the end of the party, Madeline exited the museum with the rest of us, gripping her purse tightly to her chest. But at the very moment she was descending the steps, an enterprising boy who walked the neighbor's dogs for a fee was passing by with a motley crew of canines on intertwined leashes. Well, perhaps Madeline had been gripping her purse a little too tightly, and one of the baggies had burst, because suddenly all 8 dogs were tugging at their restraints. 4 of them began to bark. The urgency of the pack proved too much for the lad, and breaking free, they bounded up the steps in her direction. Faced with certain death, Madeline did what any sensible woman would do. She reached into her purse and began flinging the meatballs at the oncoming dogs as her fellow Manhattanites looked on in horror. Which just goes to show that while thrift may be a virtue, every virtue has its limits. I'm going to stop there. Anyway, it gives us a little insight into this little world. That's why I like reading novels. I get into the worlds that I would never see. I just read one about living in a remote island in Hawaii. So anyway, I certainly hope you enjoyed this, and I commend Amor Towles. My favorite book is, as I said, All the Light We Cannot See. His book, Cloud Cuckooland, is also brilliant. And I'm loving his book of short stories called Table for Two. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments, and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. And certainly we welcome you taking a look at any of my 33 books, including the most recent one, In a Word, 100 takes on my takes on 100 words that I find interesting. In any event, but all 33 are on Amazon. Just go there, search on my name, Marty Nemko, Nemko, and you will find more than you can stomach. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.